Thank you for waiting, ladies and gentlemen. Now, the NRI Dream Up the Future Forum 2021 starts. I hope you enjoy it. Now, the first session of the forum is the after the pandemic. What would be the strategies of the Japanese corporation? The speaker is the NRI's Representative Director, Chairman, and President, Mr. Shingo Konomoto. Those who wish to listen to English translation, please click the channel saying English. You can find that upper right-hand side corner. Okay, then, floor is yours. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Komoto. I am from NRI. To take this opportunity, I would like to extend my heartfelt appreciation for you and your patronage for NRI. And I also would like to say thank you for joining us at the NRI Dream Up the Future Forum 2021. Due to COVID-19 pandemic, we have invited only 1,000 people physically here in this room, even though the capacity is much more. And people who, over 7,000 people have registered to this webinars, and many people are listening to us on the webinars, and please allow some inconvenience there. And I hope you will enjoy today's forum. So let's begin my presentation. The title of my speech is the future after the pandemic. Was going to be the strategy for Japanese corporation. This forum started in 2017. And the first 3 years, we discussed about what will be the near future driven by the digital technology. And we discussed about the future of economy and how the digital technology would really contribute to the changes of the economy. And then last year, due to the COVID-19 pandemic, we changed the title and discussed about the relation between the COVID-19 pandemic and also digital technology. And this year, I wanted to review what happened last year, and really want to take a stock of what we did. And after that, want to discuss some issues such as the stagnation of the economy and also reconstruction of the economy, and would like to really shed light on the policies and concept what we devised for that. In the past, we picked up the digital technologies as the main topic of this theme, and today I will be taking a stop of what we have done. And I don't think that I have to go into the detail about the past session, but the contents relevant to these sessions are described in these two books called Digital Capitalism and also Digital Wealth of Nations. And every month we publish Knowledge Creation and Integration. It's in a monthly magazine. And the January issue of each year have a summary of previous year. So what I'm going to speak to you today, the next year January issue of the Knowledge Creation and Integration will be covering my speech today. And if you are interested in the contents of these sessions, you can also visit the website so that you can also download some of the presentations materials from this website. So please come to our website and then look for the contents of the forum. And you can do so from the knowledge creation and integration area. So at the beginning, I would like to take stock of what we have done last year, and after that, we'll be discussing about the sustainable society driven by the digital technologies and among other topics. So first, let me review 2020. X-axis is the level of lockdown. This was produced by the Oxford College, and this is titled as Our World in Data. So this is a level of the severity of the lockdown. In some countries, schools were closed. Sometimes they ban the foreign residents' entrance to the countries, or some actually locked down the transportation system. And using some of these index, they set the level of severity of the lockdown. And the y-axis is the real GDP growth rate for 2020. The blue area, the severer the lockdown levels are, then usually their real GDP growth rate drops. And Japan is in the left-hand side. Since our lockdown level was rather lenient, we are really away from these blue areas. And you can find Ireland on the right-hand side. You may know that there are many pharmaceutical factories in Ireland. Therefore, they enjoyed the great exports. So that's why they are outside of this blue area. At any rate, you can see that lockdown and a level of the severity actually has strong relation with the GDP growth rate. So this is a comparison against the Lehman shock era. This was a financial crisis, and it gave more impact to the developed countries. But in case of the pandemic, the developed country negative 4.7%, but developing countries, emerging markets, again, it's negative growth, so that you can find some difference between the Lehman shock time. And also dropping degrees are much more severe this time. So I would like to show you data which gives different perspectives to you. So these are listed companies, especially the large-scale companies, total revenues. And when you look at the profit level, especially the drops of the profit, that you can see if you compare to the Lehman shock time that it's much better. This is the large-scale companies, so that they enjoyed export to the United States and also China, and remote from home, work from home type of work style really saved them from really impacting their revenues or profit. So if you look at these numbers, that the large-scale listed companies didn't suffer that much. And this dotted line shows you the prediction for the future. So it's going to be much better than 2018, and 2022 that they are expected to grow even more. So in case of large-scale listed companies, that they fared pretty well in spite of the pandemic. In case of Lehman shock, we didn't have a smartphone, and probably people were not really able to make use of the digital technologies. But this time, the digital technologies are ubiquitous, and I think that the economic impact or negative impacts were alleviated due to this digital technology, such as the use of the smartphone or work from home type of things. So This is the one I shown you last year at this forum, that this is a work from home percentage. The blue means that even before the COVID they done, and the light blue means that we started doing it due to the pandemic. In Western world, 50 to 60% work from home. Even in Japan, about 30% of the people started working from home. The US, Italy, UK, those areas which had very strict lockdown that they really had to work from the home.
Looking at the next slide, this shows the situation in detail about Japan. As you can see here, the average in Japan for teleworking was about 30% who work from home. But by region, the situation is quite different. For Kanto region as well as the Kinki region, where there's major cities, people were trying to avert the 3 Cs: closed spaces, crowded places, and close contact settings. And in these areas, there was more people that were remotely working. Another thing is business going online. This shows the e-commerce market trends globally. As you can see, you'll be able to know that last year, in an incontinuous manner, we saw a pickup in the e-commerce ratio. When you look back at the past year, that's where we are, but now I'd like to look out into the future. First of all, please refer to this chart. The x-axis is the lockdown severity index that I talked about earlier, and the cases of COVID is shown on the vertical axis. There isn't a correlation between the two, meaning even if the lockdowns are severe, it doesn't mean that cases are under control. That's what you can pick up from here. In the case of Japan, we show European and countries as well as the US here, but the number of cases are far lower than those countries in Japan. But the lockdowns were not as severe. Even so, cases for COVID-19 patients were under control to a certain degree. But what we learned in Western countries is because the lockdowns are severe, they were not able to keep the cases down. So, in light of this, respective countries have different policies in place. And if you refer to the next slide, as we show at the very top, Lee Hsien Loong, Prime Minister from Singapore, the Independence Day anniversary on August the 29th, he delivered a speech and he said that even if you do lockdowns over a long period of time, COVID cases will not zero out. If you vaccinate, you might be able to avert getting COVID-19, but if you don't get vaccinated, you will definitely get it, or it might develop into serious symptoms. By getting vaccinated and taking precautions, we can create a society that is COVID resilient. That is what the Prime Minister said in his speech, meaning that the world, it's a matter of coexisting with the virus, and the country has pivoted towards coexistence. So COVID resilience was the key word. So one way of addressing this is maybe vaccine passports, but basically, as we show at the bottom right of the slide, in the future as well, there is a risk that cases might re-expand, which means that we need to establish a society that can maintain economic activities, even if we reduce contact on a physical basis. So as countries pivot towards this direction, what are the mindsets of its people? So I have several slides that speak to this subject that I would like to share with you. So after COVID-19 resolves, the question was asked whether people will go back to their original lives. The area that's highlighted in blue are people who said they will go back to their lives pre-COVID, but it's less than 30% of the respondents. The majority of people are saying that they're not going to go back entirely to the lives they delivered pre-COVID. That's how they're feeling. To dig deeper, and we asked about expenditures. Are you going to go back to spending as you did before COVID was the question? At the very top, it's domestic travel. When you add the two blue boxes, it's about more than 50%, 51%, meaning that many people would like to go back to traveling domestically again post-COVID. But it's only half of the respondents, meaning the remaining half are saying they're not going to go back to their usual travel patterns. For dining out, as well as traveling overseas, doing karaoke, or watching sports at stadiums, it's only about 40% of the people or respondents who said they will go back to what they used to do pre-COVID. So depending on how widespread COVID becomes going forward, I'm sure the numbers will differ. However, when you think about evoking demand, some kind of strong stimulus initiative needs to take place, or else consumption is not expected to go back to its original level pre-COVID. That's what this implies. So why are people being so cautious? When asking the reasons why, it's because many people think, or 40% of the people think, that it's not going to go back to the original situation. And some people say that they got used to the current lifestyles. 18% of people responded in that manner. So they got used to the current lifestyles. And these people, I believe that if COVID were to resolve, even so, they will not easily go back to their original lifestyles. So next is, what are corporates thinking? Let's take a look at what kind of trends are anticipated in the future. First of all, when you look back at the past 1 year, for listed companies, when you look at travel expenses, transportation and communication expenses, and the trends, we picked up information from about 400 companies, and travel, transportation, and communication expenses, especially travel and transportation expenses, went down substantially. About 90% of companies experienced a decline in this expenditure item, and on average, it went down by approximately 37% or close to 40%, meaning that their break-even points have obviously went down. So if we were able to go back to pre-COVID levels, some necessary expenditures will probably come back up. But for the people who are managing their business, from their point of view, their business became leaner, and obviously they don't want to have it go back to its original level. I'm sure that's what they have on their minds. For business trips, we asked another additional question around this. And pre-COVID, the blue people are saying that travel is going to become more. And that was about 40% of people for domestic travel, and it was about 35% for overseas travel. So more than the recovery in consumption, demand from businesses is not expected to go back and recover that quickly. Furthermore, we asked a question around teleworking too. Looking at the press coverage lately, at some companies, they're saying that as the COVID-19 resolves and cases go down, they are going back to their original policy for commuting to work. However, from an employee's point of view, about 90% of people are saying that the current way of working is something they would like to continue. That does incorporate teleworking. But it's only about 20% of people who are saying that they want everything to be telework. They're saying that they would like a combination. More people are saying they would like a combination between teleworking as well as working at the office. So this new work style, I believe, will become established even more in the future. So this is the final page of this part. This is not only Japan, but it's a global survey that we conducted towards corporates. In light of COVID, we asked a question about the acceleration of digital transformation. And they were saying that 68% of companies said they were able to accelerate DX at a substantial degree because they had to. But at least in light of COVID, digital transformation at corporates did progress. So what happened in our country as well as in regional cities? Looking at this chart on the next page, the horizontal axis shows DCI, which represents the Digital Capability Index. Our research institute does an exclusive measurement of this index. Looking at the prefectures in Japan, they look at the progress of how digitalized they are and how much penetration it has been making, and they turn it into an index. The definition has been spoken about in past forums, so I hope you can refer to that later on. But for this, from number 1 to number 47, we rank it and laid out in order.
We measure them every year, so even among 47 different prefectures, there are some movement. But the number one is always Tokyo. It has been. And extremely left, you can find the especially high one, which is Tokyo. But last 1 year, we've seen a great changes. We never seen this much changes in the past. So as you can see, the lower prefectures, DCI, increased dramatically. And the difference between the top and the bottom has shrunk. And also the digital divide among the metropolitan areas and also local economies have come to much smaller. Why is that? The local digitalization, why did it make a progress due to the pandemic? So especially the digital public services, the frequency of using digital public services has increased much more in the local government. They started using My Numbers, and also the administrative services have become more online-based services. And looking at these different index, we came up with DCI. And the last 1 year, this digital public service has grown so much. The September the 1st, that 37% of the residents already acquired the My Number cards. It's still very low. And from this month, that the health insurance is now connected to the My Number card. So due to this pandemic, that finally the digitalization will make a progress. And I would say that 2022 would be the starting year for Japanese local governments to digitalize themselves. Maybe we can say that in the future. So hope that the digital agency will be very active in these areas. So that was the end of my review of 2020. We have many infected people, and also of course, some of the businesses suffered a lot, and there are some people who also economically suffering. But all in all, the government and the corporations and even the individuals' digitalization made a progress. That was 2020. Now, from now on, let me change the theme a little bit. So digitalization finally took off. And there are two challenges that we are facing right now. The economic stagnation, and another one is it is almost like a homework from the future, sustainable society. How do we cope with the emission and the CO2 gases? So these two are the things that we have to really tackle with. And digital technology may be able to contribute greatly to both of these problems. So first of all, economic issue, the left-hand side, and sustainable society is on the right-hand side. So let's start from the left. The economic growth rate, this is the equation. So the increase of the labor numbers and also the working hours and also the productivity. So if you add all three, then you can see GDP growth. And what about the numbers of the workers? And I think this is a result of the Abe administrations. The working rate itself increased. That's due to many more women started working, and 0.4% the working rate increased every year. Meanwhile, the overall the population that you have to multiply with the working rate, the overall population decreasing tremendously. Even though the working rate increases, the total working hours decreased, so that almost 4 million people will be out of the labor market over 15-year-old, so that the total working hour will not increase. And we went through the work style reform, and the last 7-8 years it was 1,700 hours, but since 2 years ago it became 1,600 hours. So almost 100 hours reduced in 1 year, which is extremely good. However, when the working hour came down, then the GDP is also affected. Germany and then Denmark, 1,350 hours for 1,350 hours for Denmark and in Germany, so that these working hours will reduce further even in Japan. And what about the productivity? Every year it changes. Very difficult to predict. But last decade, at the average, productivity increased by 0.8%. So if you assume this is going to continue, then scenario 1 is the labor working hours is the same, and the productivity increased by 0.8. And if Japanese work style will catch up with the Nordic countries, then that is going to be scenario 2. So I think that we are getting closer to scenario 2 rather than 1. So if you simply calculate it, 2020s, early 2030s, this is going to be minus or negative GDP growth rate. And I think that is going to be the near future's number. So we should not really depend on the labor input. If we just keep relying on the labor input, then the economy itself will be stagnated. So 2017, we started this forum, and at the first forum, we proposed digital capitalism. Conventional capitalism is based on the industrial revolutions. Those capitalists really take a lead in the market, and it's really based on the product and try to increase the added value. And that is done by the labor productivities. So when it comes to digital capitalism, it is not the product. This is a digital services on the platform. And so the sources of the value is not the labor, but this is data, which really produces the new value for the product. This is going to be the new economic system. And it's a shift from the industrial capitalism to the digital capitalism. That's what we talked about in 2017. I recommended we have to move to the digital first management. Shifting from left to right, you may say it's easy logically, but you really have to change your mindset and also the paradigm. So when you think of the changes of the mindset, to go to the digital capitalism, conventionally, we always believe that the product had a value. Hardware had to have a better performance, and also the people and also things and then monies were the sources of the profit. But the right-hand side, the intangibles become values, softwares, so that rather than a performance, you look at the quality of services and also people, data, and the data has more values, and a variety of the services will be provided on the platform, so that this is going to be very liquid. In case of Rakuten Group, Rakuten, is that the sales company of the product or financial companies or travel agencies? They are providing the host of services on the platform, so that the industrial structures really fluent due to the digitalization. So that's the difference between left and right.
And the definitive difference is a depreciation society versus a value appreciation society. So it's product centric on the left. So the value is the highest when it's new. And the more it's used, it depreciates as time passes. So that's the notion behind depreciation. But on the right-hand side, what we talk about is when you launch the service, that's when the value is at its lowest. Then after, by having the customers utilize the service, and by learning through the service, you'll be able to update software. And as time passes, you'll be able to add value. So that is why I'm saying value appreciation here. So often you use discount rates when you do calculation, which means that you're working off the assumption that value will depreciate over time. But that's basically the way of thinking on the left-hand side. But on the right-hand side, it's quite different. As time passes, services will be updated accordingly and will continue to generate value. So that's the economic scheme here. So the left and the right, it might be easily said verbally, but you really need to change your mindset to make this change. And I'd like to talk about this later as well. So one more challenge that Japan faces, which is global challenges and addressing them, which is becoming a prerequisite. Rebecca Henderson will be from HBS, a famous professor from HBS will be speaking later through video. And she has published a book called Reimagining Capitalism, and I'm sure many of you have read it already. So global level challenges is an issue around externality, meaning when you think about the internet, the more participants there are, convenience will be enhanced. So it's a networking effect. With the external economy moving and with more participants, the value will be created and will enhance. But the issues we're facing right now, under current capitalism, the more activities that corporates engage in, a lot of external problems will be caused. So it's a negative external economy that is underway. And we can't let this happen. We need to internalize the cost regarding issues around external affairs, and that's why it's leading to goals such as SDGs. So of course, short-term performance needs to be realized. However, it needs to be balanced together with sustainable and public interest. So being able to achieve both is being asked for in society. So external negative economy, with regards to this issue, it's a hot topic around this can be talked about by talking about CO2 issues. So I'd like to give some explanation later on. So energy-driven CO2 emissions, as time passes, you could see that it has been increasing. It went down by 1.4% in light of the Lehman crisis, and this time around, in light of COVID-19, CO2 emissions globally went down by 5.8%, which was the highest ever in the post-war period, meaning the economy went through stagnation, so CO2 emissions also decreased. So it went down by 1.92 billion tons. So if we were to break this down, it will look like this. From 1990 to 2019, when you look at CO2 emissions and how you can predict it, as shown in the formula, it is related with GDP growth as well as the energy mix ratio. You are able to predict. It says R2. It's 0.99, meaning a GDP and energy mix can predict the amount of CO2 emissions. But for the last 1 year, there were some parts that couldn't be explained, which is the orange part, or 530 million tons. So this was reduced under a different scheme, meaning it was due to different reasons, not because of economic stagnation. So, as you also may surmise, it's probably because of digitalization. Many things went online or went to teleworking, and people traveled less. That may have impacted the reduction. So we verified the results, as you can see on the next slide. And when you look back at last year, it was a transportation segment that saw the greatest reduction of CO2 emissions. It went down by 1.14 billion tons. As you can see here, commuting, travel went down. People didn't go in domestic or overseas travel, or people didn't shop outside at physical stores as much, which may have led to lower CO2 emissions. So there was about 500 million tons of CO2 emission reductions that couldn't be explained by economic activities, and it says 1.14 billion here. So 500 million ton is about 1/2 of the 1.14. So about half of the reductions was due to behavioral changes, presumably. That's one conclusion we can derive. So change in behavior, when you look at it in detail, we may be able to reduce CO2 even further. So we ran some calculations. So this is mobility as a service. We took a closer look at mobility as a service, and if we see more progress here, we were trying to simulate how much CO2 reduction it could lead to. So 2% is the initial value. In the US, it's 1.5. In Europe, it's 2%. When you look at total travel distance, the mass ratio is currently at only 1 or 2%. However, in the next 10 years, if it were to reach 10% in Japan, 20% in the US, and 30% in Europe, what is going to happen is what we simulated. If mass increases, taxis will come on demand. So overall travel distance will be reduced. And if buses can drive on demand as well, the number of buses traveled will probably go down as well. So total travel distance or running distance is likely to decrease. So we did the calculations based off that logic, which means that Japan, US, and Europe can add to about 300 million tons of reduction effects. And we talked about the unexplainable CO2 emission reductions worth 500 million tons. So this is not as significant as 500 million tons, but by engaging in mobility as a service, it may be able to reduce CO2 emissions by 300 million tons. So the contribution is quite substantial, is what we expect. Meaning digitalization is something, depending on the way you use it, may be able to contribute to reducing GHG, as well as be able to contribute to social issues we have globally. And I'm sure you're familiar with the slide. These are the 17 SDGs by the UN. Through new digital services, this might be hard to read off, but by having digital and leveraging the advantages, one advantage is going online. One is making things visible. So going online and going visible, by combining the two features, as you can see on the slide, against the 17 SDGs, many types of contribution can be considered. is what we feel. And to talk about our company a little, the dark bold blue lines are areas where our company is focusing on. We have set some targets of how we could contribute to society through our business, and we have been setting KPIs towards these targets. And every year, we spin this PDCA cycle at our board meeting. So the bold blue lines represents what we're engaging in. So although our contributions may be small through our business, we are trying to address and contribute to social challenges. So I'm sorry for deviating. So going back to the main topic, like I just said, the more progress we see in digitalization, we can expect more contribution to social challenges, as I said on the previous page. So this on the horizontal axis shows DESI. The EU Commission every year publishes this, which is a Digital Economy and Society Index. The more you go to the right, it means that digitalization has made higher penetration. We have explained this in past forums. So if you can look at our back numbers of our publication, knowledge creation and integration, you'll be able to get a specific definition. The vertical axis shows the SDGs index. It talks about how much progress you've been making and engaging in SDGs. So the correlation coefficient is 0.67, so it's not that high. But when you compare it with GDP per capita, the more digitalization progress you're making, the engagement in SDGs is higher. Is one conclusion we can make, and that's why I'm sharing this chart with you, especially for the 3 Nordic countries, Finland, Sweden, and Denmark. They have been showing high performance. So in the final segment, I would like to go back to this topic again.
Okay, less than 20 minutes. So now moving on to the whether we can maintain the economic growth and also sustainable growth at the same time. And I think that the digitalization can help doing so. We really have to have both, which means that we have to go on to green growth approach. To do so, the corporation must be digital native corporation. I mentioned the word, the digital capitalism, but the corporations themselves have to be digital first. So let me talk about. So data produces value. How do the corporation shift from the conventional management to the digital first management? So I give you an example of Komatsu. Komatsu is the manufacturer of the construction equipment, and they started a new company called Earthbrain. This is for the civil engineering market, 24 trillion yen per year. And also, its order these to external world. And if we can make the good, efficient ordering, then it is going to be about the 3.1 trillion yen per year type of the cost saving. In other words, they can produce value. So how to make the order value more efficient? And that's the Komatsu is currently studying. So this is one example. Before the construction, they do the surveying. It used to be done by the people. It takes days. But with the use of drone surveying, you can finish it within a day. And that drone's data can be developed into the 3D measurement so that you can do the simulation on computer. And when the machine has sensors, then you really have to transport the earth and also the gravels, and then you can also measure the amount of transportation of these different materials. So you can do the PDCA virtually, and also you can visualize all the operations. So even after the construction, that the drone can actually check over all world condition. So what the Earth Brain's purpose? This is the department-wide type of data integration. With the dashboard, you can see all the movements and operations on the construction site. And you can predict exactly that how many days that until the completion of this construction, and you can really minimize the idle time of the construction machineries, since you can exactly predict the completion day of the construction. And also for the human resources, that you can have very accurate forecast of the completion of the construction, so that you can hire people exactly. By doing so, as I said in the previous day, that you don't really have to externalize the sum of the works. And not just the y-axis, but if you connect the data horizontally, you can visualize all the operations on the construction site. To do so, you need to have the lots of data on the dashboard, analyze them, and you need application to analyze these different data and create the optimal model, and also providing the assignments for different vendors. And you can also create and develop new algorithm to combine different data. So this is going to be the appreciation type of business, value appreciation type of businesses. So what's the difference against the conventional business? This is how we analyzed Komatsu's business on our own, so I'm not sure the intent is about the same as the Komatsu's intention, but in the conventional business, they produce lots of hardwares and then products, and mass production reduce the cost and try to get the profit as much as possible, but that is based on the depreciation value. But on the right hand side, new type of business, you can save the cost at the construction site. So rather than a performance of the machinery, you need to understand what's going on at the construction site. So the source of the profit is from data. And also you can create the algorithm, and that produces value. Data themselves can produce values. So business models are different, and also the management know-hows are different, so that these two are totally different. The great shift in the mindset, or I would say paradigm shift. However, easier said than done. Sometimes it's very difficult to shift to digital-first management. I mentioned Komatsu, but let me talk other examples, GE and Schneider Electric. You probably know that GE is a very famous company, and Jeffrey Immelt, the CEO, created the GE Digital in 2011 and announced that all the hardware would be transformed into software, and they committed to the mission that they're going to be the largest software company. At the end, it didn't go well, and 2017 the Immelt retired, and right now they are in the midst of revitalization of the business. The strategy itself was very fresh. The things or products are turned into digital services and also produce value there. So the concept itself was good, but it didn't go well. Why is that? This is our analysis of the failure. As for the marketing, they used to sell machineries and also get the maintenance contract. But the new model, they help increasing the performance of the customers, so that they gain the profit out of the service fee, out of subscription contract, so that the sales reps had to change their way of selling products. But the sales rep couldn't really change their mindset. And also for the customers, the customer had to transfer their operation data to GE platform, and they were rather reluctant since some of them are very confidential, and they were not really convinced that their productivity would increase thanks to this. So the customer side didn't really understand this business model. And they created GE Digital in 2011 in Silicon Valley. And in 5 years, it increased to 5,500 people company. So that they hired more than 5,000 software engineers, which had nothing to do with GE. And hardware and then software had to be integrated into one, but they didn't have good communication between software engineer and hardware engineer. So at the end, didn't go well. On the other hand, this is an example of Schneider Electric, French company. The sales scale is about 3 trillion in scale. I'm sure that many of you in the audience know this company. Their major products are the charging equipment, a bit similar to Fuji Electric in Japan. This is the stock price trend, so a bit different from their real profit, but they have successfully transformed their business model and faring very well right now. Their approach was different from GE. First of all, at each business unit, they started the reform. So GE Digital, that was top-down approach. But for their Schneider Electric, they started giving the information to the customer first. And on the right-hand side, based on the data, they started helping the performance improvement at the customer from 2017. And they already had these record so that they can show the record to the customers and enjoy the business from the subscription model. And the subscription contract is increasing.
So they really put importance on the field initiatives and the customers' comprehension. They communicated well so that their customers will understand. So I think this was a success case, and this is one of the reasons why they were successful. So in other words, the business units, things happened in a bottom-up way through the activities in the field. And when things started to make progress in the business, it can become more efficient when it's commonized. And so commonization activities took place on a company-wide basis. So I think the bottom-up and top-down approach circulated in a very virtuous way. Another thing I'd like to mention is towards their employees, they were able to do a good mindset change. At Schneider Electric, from the management level and management level people, they have a relationship with Insured, and they have a digital leadership course in partnership with INSEAD, and they learn about the significance of going through DX and so forth. So they did a repetition of this course. And towards their general employees, they did digital transformation training for online working. So, of course, at GE, they did fast work for a mindset change on a group-wide basis. However, the Six Sigma era and their successes during that phase was so strong that fast work in the digital world didn't take root. But in the case of Schneider, they started from the top and cascaded down to the bottom and talked about the importance of transforming their business steadily. And they were able to run all of their employees through this enlightenment activity, which was one of the reasons why they were successful. So I talked about GE and Schneider briefly, but service development on a top-down manner was what GE tried to do. But in Schneider's case, they were able to incorporate the bottom-up approach as well. And they perceived it as a corporate transformation, including enlightening their people. It wasn't just about setting up a services division, but the company itself needed to change towards this direction. And management did a good job on this. And I think the difference became apparent between the two companies because of their differing approaches. So I talked about large companies so far. So I'd like to talk about a medium-sized company in Japan where this kind of initiative is also underway. So it's Tadaseki, which is a mold manufacturer with their headquarters in Gifu Prefecture. Their leadership is quite competent, and they are currently engaging in digital transformation, and they have been generating good results as well. And that's why I would like to share this with you. So machine tools and processing tools, they are able to generate and accumulate data from this equipment. And for the molds they deliver to their customers, it's attached with sensors, so they are able to pick up various pieces of data from their molds as well. And on a real-time basis, processing data can be accumulated, and the design of the database is extremely complicated, and it requires a lot of investments to do this. However, due to our BOS, business-oriented solution architecture, by having them utilize this architecture, it can simplify the way you own databases. And smart molds can collect flow information, and when data accumulates, the molded parts, you're able to tell from data whether they are good in quality or defects. And if the molds were to be shipped to Southeast Asia, for example, it is quite remote, distant-wise, but by collecting the mold data online, you're able to remotely monitor the status of the molds. And that's what we call smart molds. And for the smart production system, for the processing equipment, it is able to pick up data real time. So if the blade needs to be replaced soon, you'll be able to tell from the data that has been accumulated, and you're able to draw a conclusion or make a decision. And you're able to prevent failures from occurring. And for smart production management, this is when from each of the processes you're able to pick up and accumulate data. So from when you take orders until you ship the product, you're able to centrally manage the data. It goes back to the smart construction example from EarthBrain. So it's the same way of thinking. So if you're able to do this, for molds, there are peak times in orders as well as low seasons, but you're able to visualize the production management. Therefore, you're able to predict when utilization is going to be either high or low. And Tadaseki has 3 factories, and machine utilization can be monitored, and they are able to smooth out the utilization rate overall because of this system. And currently, it's not only their group, but they're looking at other mold manufacturers. If they're able to incorporate the system, they're able to smooth out the utilization rates overall nationwide. So this is something that is likely to start going forward. So why are they so successful in their efforts? It's because the management has a clear vision. It's not just about collecting data and let's start from there. From the beginning of the process, it was about what kind of problems they wanted to solve. They had a theme they wanted to engage in. So related to the themes and challenges, the measures we're implementing. So they have a high awareness towards the issues they face. And it also says here, digital with the field, meaning in the field or at the job site, blade replacement can be confirmed through data. For the people who work in the field, they will be able to reduce the burden they have. For the people who are working in the field, there is a benefit, a clear benefit, and digital can solve their challenges. So it's really easy to see the output. That's what they put priority on. And it says employee mindset, finally, on the right. Up until now, people were questioning, why should we do digital in such a small company? Why should we incorporate IT? We could do it with our intuition, as well as the secrets we have learned from the past. There were some employees who thought that way, but by showing results, the mindset of the employees has started to change, and the president took initiative in engaging in this initiative, which generated results. And I met their leadership in person, but I think they really well managed a company. So I am running out of time, but I would like to talk a little more. So I gave the example of GE, Schneider, as well, that are large companies, as well as Tadaseki, that is a smaller company. But overall, when you question what digital first is all about, it's not just about making the business model go online. It's about corporate transformation, as well as changing the mindsets of the organization. Unless you do so, you are not able to achieve good results. That is what I would like to convey to you today in this presentation. So finally, I am out of time, but I would like to ask you for 5 minutes of your time. It's about initiatives around digitalization and sustainability in communities. So SDG progress can be made through digitalization, as I showed you in the chart. And on the top right, I mentioned the Nordic countries that are doing a good job. So I'd like to talk about Denmark today. The economy is growing. However, CO2 emissions are going down, which is called green growth, I guess. So why is this possible is what I would like to talk about. So first of all, their conditions are completely different from Japan. That's something I need to say. But this is the energy mix of Denmark. Renewables account for 82% of their total mix. So compared to Japan, this is something that we should envy. In Europe, from the Nordic countries, they can bring hydraulic power as well as nuclear power from the European countries. They can leverage the characteristics of each country that is connected to enhance the level of renewables. But Japan is an island, so we need to resolve all of these issues alone, which is a quite difficult problem to solve. And IEA last year issued this chart related to renewables cost and comparing to other energy sources. And you could see that the cost is far higher compared to other types of energies.
Paris Agreement 1.5, but you really have to make it to 2 degrees Celsius. It is going to be catastrophic situation. So you have to make it carbon neutrality in 2050. So we really have to decrease 46% of the reduction, and that is international commitment made by Prime Minister Suga. To achieve 46% reduction, 20 to 22% nuclear power, renewable energy currently 16%, but that have to be 36 to 38%. So it is very important, very difficult to achieve. Next month, the COP26 will be held, and after that, we have to think of concrete countermeasures to really achieve the target. But Japan has been handicapped in a way. So it's a big difference against the Denmark situation. So can we learn something new other than that? So that is going to be the last watch. 2050, the Denmark also aim to be carbon neutral. But Copenhagen, 2025, Aarhus and Odense, 2030. So these cities have a target then much earlier than the central government. So the local initiatives are very active, and they really prioritize these local communities' initiatives. Of course, central government policies are very important, but they really prioritize local economies targets. So how can we achieve the target in these regional communities? And we believe that there are 3 points. Number one is to make the cities grid as a smart grid. You really have to visualize all the data with digital technology. Unless you have the digital technology in the local government, you can't really visualize them. So after the carbon neutrality achievement, how do you grow? How do you obtain green growth? They already gave much thought to that. The third one is the motivation for the residents. The Copenhagen people ride bicycles, and then there are special highway for bike riders to go. And but it's up to each individual whether they use car or bicycles. So unless the people are motivated to use the non-emission type of vehicles, you can't really push them to use bicycle. So first one is about the making a smart city. Please look at the chart. This IMD's chart. This is annual chart, and the Copenhagen is number 6, and the number 1 Singapore. But there are many in the Western. Number 8 Taipei, but unfortunately 109 out of 109 cities, Tokyo 79th and Osaka 80th. So that when the city becomes smart, then the in Denmark every household has the smart meter, and buildings, the energy consumptions are measured by digital technologies, and these data are shared by others so that they can think of how to save energies. And startup companies and others can recommend how to save energies. So this is a very basic of the city. Unless we have this infrastructure, you cannot really have a smart city or promote towards the carbon neutrality. Second, after the achievement of the carbon neutrality, how do you grow your economy? The power sources are green so that they can host more data centers, because these electricities are all clean. So they are welcoming these data centers. Odense has a big data center of Facebook, and heat generated from these data centers are used by the local heating facilities for buildings and also households. So they have many mechanisms to really make use of these things for the growth in the future. And the third one, the quality of life of people in the city. They prioritize it. In case of Copenhagen, they have Copenhagen 2025 vision, and this is the general carbon neutral vision. And the purpose here is to grow the city and also increase the quality of life, improve the quality of life of residents, so that they have a purpose and also means to go to that target. Nordic countries, they have Nordic democracy, and residents have a good sense of participation in the politics. But in case of Japan, in June, that they announced a very thick booklet called the Decarbonization Roadmap in the local communities. And they say they designate the 100 cities which can work on the decarbonization at the early stage, and also setting some sandbox, and people can try many things in the sandbox, and then they can use the best practices. However, when you look at these things from the regular resident, how can they use these movement to improve their quality of life? And after achieving the carbon neutrality, what type of measures can be done to improve the economic situation of the local communities. So they set the carbon neutrality as ultimate goal, and they don't really plan any other things. They just focus on the carbon neutrality. And the Kishida administration, hopefully that they will discuss on these different matters and hope to incorporate the perspective from the residents. At any rate, in Japan, we are really handicapped with many different challenges and yet have to work towards the carbon neutrality. Okay, let's run out of time, and want to summarize what I have just said. Today I talked about the digital technologies will be very important aspect for the revitalization of the economy and also achieving the sustainable society. But to implement these policies, you have to overcome several issues. In case of a private corporation, you really have to change the mindset of the employees. Otherwise, you can't shift to digital first management. In case of a community, they really have to take initiative in their own community, but the policy based on the perspective of the residents are necessary. Otherwise, that each individual will not be motivated to work towards the sustainable community. Thank you very much for your kind attention. This is all I have to say today. Thank you.